So think about this. How would you like it if you wrote an absolute masterpiece with some really great lyrics, some pretty deep ones, and the song failed? And then another band cut your song and made it a #1 smash, one of the biggest songs ever, but then they botched your lyrics so badly that it turned the words into a big joke that people are still laughing about today. The lyric in question was about a badass hot rod, and instead the words were so slurred by the singer it turned the hot rod into a lyric about a hygiene product for crotches. It became a funny punchline and one of the most notorious misheard lyrics ever. But the story gets even better. And in the end, the original legend who wrote it, he's laughing about it, decades after laughing all the way to the bank. Story, oh, it's a great one. It's coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever figured out years later that you were singing lyrics to a classic song incorrectly, you're gonna dig this channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the big red button. Get the real stories and the rich history of your favorite jams. Also, click the bell so that you always know when our interviews are gonna drop. Got some great ones coming. Also, check us out on Patreon and our brand new merch below. Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Bruce Springsteen has never had a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. No joke, never. Although he's come close, 1984 Born in the USA single Dancing in the Dark, that reached #2. It's behind Prince's When Doves Cry.
Even if we're just dancing in the dark, don't make me chase you, even doves that cry.
He's had plenty of #1 albums, and then the following year, Springsteen sang a solo, or actually a couple solos on the #1 charity song, We Are the World, with 50 plus musicians performing on the track. That gives him roughly 1/50 of the credit. Technically, there's one more Springsteen song that should be part of this near-miss conversation. It's actually a song that he wrote, and it went to #1 on the Hot 100, only the chart-topping version was sung by someone else. Today, we're going to give you the history, the story of how Blinded by the Light went from a non-hit to a #1 smash with Manfred Mann, his Earth band, and how the chorus has been sung incorrectly by many of us confused listeners, confused as to what the singer was actually saying. So when Columbia Records president Clive Davis heard Bruce Springsteen, he heard a folk singer reminiscent of an early Bob Dylan and contemporary artists like Jackson Browne and James Taylor. However, Bruce Springsteen was not interested in really taking up Dylan's mantle, though he was a huge influence. Being cast in the role of a folk-driven singer-songwriter was really about the last thing that he wanted. Rather, he was keen to work with a rock band, so for the Boss's first album, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, 50th anniversary of that, a compromise was reached that allowed Springsteen to bring in his boys, future E Street Band members Vinnie Lopez, Davey Sanchez, and Gary Tallent. Springsteen began writing the album in early '72. The resulting tracks would be largely autobiographical, a young New Jersey songwriter's thoughts as he set out to conquer New York City. When Bruce finished it, Clive Davis flat out rejected it. He felt that it lacked a potential hit single or even anything that could be played on the radio. In response to this, Springsteen wrote 2 more single-oriented tracks, Spirit in the Night and Blinded by the Light.
Dance like spirits in the night, all night, in the night. Yeah, she was blinded by the light.
I said Springsteen about it. I came home, busted out my rhyming dictionary, and I wrote Blinded by the Light.
Cut loose like a deuce, another runner in the night.
Both songs were recorded on September 11th, 1972, but since many of his bandmates had already left town after the completion of the album, Springsteen actually played most of the instruments himself. Columbia accepted the revised album with Clive Davis, personally pleased with Springsteen's response.
Never got tight, but she'll make it. All right.
Now, Blinded by the Light, that was largely inspired by the melody of the demo track is called Henry Boy. Springsteen had recorded this earlier in June of 72.
Toys this morning, Henry rode your Ford right into dust.
Bruce called it a young musician's tale, kind of a litany of adventures that was rather on the autobiographical side. Explaining the title of the song, he said that he wanted to get blinded by the light. He wanted to do things that he hadn't done and, see things that he hadn't seen. Now, the verses also draw from the songwriter's experience. For example, the phrase madman drummers, that refers to Vinny Lopez, the E Street Band drummer at that time, who was known as Madman.
Madman drummers, bombers, and
Indians in the Summer, that alludes to the songwriter's favorite baseball team, and when he lived in Freehold, New Jersey.
Indians in the summer with a teenage diplomat.
And Teenage Diplomat, that's a reference to himself with a boulder on my shoulder. That was a symbol of oppression. Unfortunately for Bruce Springsteen, his original version of Blinded by the Light failed to chart at all. And Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey was a modest success, really. It sold only 25,000 copies in the first year of its release. I mean, it's done much more than that since. But like many songs that didn't fit radio's soft rock mold at the time, Blinded by the Light would take years to be appreciated.
the merry-go-round with this very unpleasing.
It's going to take a few years and a complete retooling by the Manfred Mann Earth Band to make that a reality. The original lead singer of Manfred Mann, Paul Jones, actually had a strong influence on Springsteen's style. There are some similarities between Jones's higher-pitched voice and some of Springsteen's early songs. Bruce even performed the old Manfred Mann song, Pretty Flamingo, a lot of his concerts.
She was so fine, like a flamingo.
But the band's namesake, Manfred Mann himself, is more central to our story. Mann has definitely had an eclectic career with mixed commercial results in the U.S. In the U.K., Manfred Mann had 14 top 20 hits between 1963 and 1969, even more afterwards with new incarnations of the band. But stateside, there were definitely some really lean years. Manfred Mann's two biggest U.S. hits were covers of American songs. Jeff Berry and Ellie Greenwich's Do-Wah Diddy Diddy. That went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Walking next to me singing.
And there was Bob Dylan's The Mighty Quinn, Quinn the Eskimo. That reached number 10. But by 1969, Mann lost interest in pop music and formed a jazz rock group called Emanon, or No Name, spelled backwards. This group evolved into Manfred Mann Chapter 3, which recorded 2 unsuccessful albums. But then in 1971, Mann came back to pop and he teamed up with singer and guitarist Mick Rogers, a bassist Colin Pattenden, and drummer Chris Slade to form Manfred Mann's Earth Band. The latest Manfred Mann incarnation released its self-titled debut in February of 72. However, their first few singles, including Randy Newman's Living Without You and Bob Dylan's Please Mrs. Henry, they both charted poorly.
Living without you. Please, Mrs. Henry, please.
Between 1972 and 1975, the Manfred Earth Band released another 5 albums, but none produced a single that charted in the U.S. In 1976, Rogers was replaced by Chris Thompson, and new guitarist Dave Flett was brought in to tweak the band's sound. On August 27, 1976, the Manfred Mann Earth Band released their 7th studio album. It's called The Roaring Silence. It would see its fair share of success. In the U.S., the album reached number 10 on the Billboard 200 album chart. And around the world, it went to number 17 in Sweden. It went to number 11 in the Netherlands, number 10 in the UK and Austria. Went to number 8 in Australia and number 6 in Norway and Canada. No doubt the biggest reason for the record's success was the Earth Band's cover of Bruce Springsteen's Blinded by the Light. Now, about this time, Bruce Springsteen fever had started, and the song became a monster hit for Manfred and company. It went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Mann doesn't seem all that worried with deciphering Springsteen's lyrics, but he delivers them with style. And the result is an impressive reinterpretation, one of the coolest songs of the 70s. Manfred Mann's take on Blinded by the Light is a 7-minute long ride into synthesized rapture. It's amazing. But according to Mann, the original version, which didn't get onto the album, was really long. It was really elaborate, quite different from the end result. He spent ages fiddling with this song. Mann took liberties with several of Springsteen's lyrics, including changing Cut Loose Like a Deuce to Revved Up Like a Deuce, except the way he says it is different than that. This, of course, resulted in one of the most notoriously misheard lyrics of all time. Generations of fans instead hearing Wrapped Up Like a Douche. Springsteen's original lyric alluded to a 2-seater hot rod, and Mann's rewrite was supposed to refer to the same thing. You could even argue the new lyrics made it even more clearly about a car. That is, if you could understand them correctly. And that's where the problem lies, with the delivery. I mean, there's no denying that the line really does sound like Wrapped Up Like a Douche. The line would stir up its fair share of controversy, of course. Said Mann about it. Suddenly I had the American record label on the phone saying, "We can't get radio stations in the Southern Bible Belt to play this record because everyone thinks you're singing about a vaginal douche." Sorry, that's just a real quote. Mann blamed the douche confusion on technical problems, a faulty azimuth due to tape head angles, which meant that they couldn't remix it. But then the rest of the track, when the band tried to do it, sounded horrible. So they left it, and they just said, if it's not a hit, it's not. Now, Mann said, the funny thing is that afterwards, people came up to me and said, "You know why that record was such a hit, don't you? Because everybody was trying to figure out if it was deuce or douche." For his part, Bruce Springsteen would joke that Blinded by the Light did not become popular until it was rewritten to be about a feminine hygiene product. He said, "Deuce was like a little Deuce coupe, as in a 2-seater hot rod." Douche is a feminine hygienic procedure, but what can I say? Another fun piece of trivia is that the piano noodling near the end of the bridge is a snippet of Chopsticks. You know, that one rite of passage piece for every piano student. Everybody knows it. As Mann remembered it, when we finally finished the album track, I thought it had a great vibe, but the next question was how to get that into a single. The real problem was how to get from the chorus to the verse really smoothly. The way we did it on the album, it just wouldn't work. I just couldn't figure out a way to do it. And then Chris Slade said, "Play Chopsticks over it." Blinded by the Light debuted at number 95 on the Hot 100 on November 20th, 1976. And after 13 weeks on the charts, it reached all the way to number 1. It also went to number 1 on the U.S. Cashbox chart. The song received monster airplay on radio stations across the English-speaking world. And since then, it's continued to be played daily, really. It also had a lot of success internationally. It went to number 19 in the Netherlands, number 11 in Australia, number 8 in New Zealand, number 6 in the UK, and went all the way to number 1 in Canada. As for pop culture, various versions of Blinded by the Light have appeared in several movies and TV shows throughout the years, including Blow.
Cocaine exploded upon the American culture like an atomic bomb.
Running with Scissors, Mystery Science Theater 3000, Friendship, The Hooker, With a Heart of Gold, and Super Troopers 2. I could make a joke about the hookers thing, but I'm not going to. In the U.S., Manfred Mann's Earth Band would never make another top 10 appearance after Blinded by the Light, though. But they stayed together. They kept at it. Their next biggest hit was actually in the 80s. It was 1984's Runner. That peaked at number 22. And you will run your time. By 1987, though, the band's revolving lineup consisted solely of Manfred Mann, Mick Rogers, and drummer Johnny Lingwood. Shortly afterwards, Earth Band went on hiatus in 1991. After that, another new lineup was put into place, and the band resumed recording, covering a multitude of tracks. Since then, Manfred Mann has also released a handful of solo projects. Out of Manfred Mann's longevity in many projects, Blinded by the Light was his biggest success. But actually, it wasn't the only Springsteen song that he would cover. In fact, Blinded by the Light wasn't even the first. Manfred Mann's 1975 album Nightingales and Bombers contained the Springsteen-penned Spirit of the Night, a song that he wrote around the same time. That peaked at number 40, actually. Honestly, looking back, it seems like the boss was just in the habit of giving away his hits. 1977, there was For You, covered by Greg Kihn. Then in 1978, Fire, performed by Pointer Sisters. That went to number 2 on the Hot 100. There was the number 33 ranking Light of Day, covered by the fictitious Barbusters, or really Joan Jett and Michael J. Fox. And then in 1988, the Dancing in the Dark B-side Pink Cadillac was covered by Natalie Cole. That went to number 5 on the Hot 100. And it went to number 1 on the Billboard Dance Club Songs chart. That almost made Born in the USA the album. Those are just a few examples, though. Of course, Bruce Springsteen still had plenty of hits of his own. And really, by the time Manfred Mann's version of Blinded by the Light hit the charts, Springsteen was well on his way to stardom. Appearing on Time magazine and Newsweek the same week. He'd go on to score his first top 10 hit just a few years later with Hungry Heart in 1980. That reached number 5.
Everybody's got a hungry heart.
Halfway through the 80s, Springsteen had become one of the biggest draws in the world. 1984's Born in the USA became Billboard's number 1 selling album in 1985, surpassing the likes of Wham and Bryan Adams and Madonna. It's right there with Michael Jackson. Born in the USA would drop 7 singles or reach the Billboard Top 10, and by the end of the 80s, only 2 other albums would accomplish that. Actually, in the rock era, there have only been 3 albums that have accomplished 7 top 10 singles. Michael Jackson's Thriller, Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation, 1814, and Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. Think about the boss is that he could write a hit song on a dime if and whenever he wanted to. And isn't it interesting that he's released almost 80 singles over a 50-plus year career, and he's never had a number 1 single, but his first single was a number 1 hit for someone else. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Blinded by the Light, the Springsteen version, the Manfred Mann's version, or both. What do you remember? What are your memories of this song? You think about the notoriously misunderstood lyric. Let us all know below. Again, we don't talk about politics here. This is all about music. I know there's some strong feelings about certain artists. Springsteen is one of my favorites of all time. I love his music. It's an incredible catalog. It's been life-changing for me. But tell us your memories, tell us your thoughts. And if you like this content, we ask you to subscribe below. Let us really become a part of this community. We'd love to have a discussion about your favorite era, your favorite bands, your favorite songs, and get the interviews that you'll really enjoy. And also check out our Patreon and our merch. We actually have the Vintage Years collection, which is pretty exciting. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.